In the golden halls of Asgard, the gods laughed, drank, and celebrated their victories, their voices echoing through the shining corridors like the ringing of 100 bronze shields. Yet among those who ruled the 9 realms, there was one who seemed to carry himself differently. He was not as boisterous as Thor, whose booming laughter could shake the rafters, nor as cryptic as Odin, whose one eye seemed always to gaze far beyond the horizon of mortal understanding. This god's strength lay not in thunder, nor in cunning riddles, but in something far older, the unyielding sense of right and wrong, of honor and oath. His name was Tyr. In the sagas they call him the god of war, but that word can be misleading. Tyr was not a god of blind slaughter or senseless rage. His war was the war of order against chaos, of justice against lawlessness. He was the one who presided over the thing, the great assembly where law was spoken, where disputes were settled, where warriors swore oaths before battle. In a world as wild as the Norse imagined, where giants lurked beyond the hills and trolls skulked in the dark forests, where monsters were born in hidden caves and chaos itself threatened to swallow creation, it was Tyr who stood as a guardian of the fragile peace. Some even say Tyr was older than Odin, a relic of an earlier age when the gods were fewer, when the boundaries of the 9 realms were still being shaped. In those elder days before the walls of Asgard were built, it was Tyr who embodied courage. His very name is thought to mean God, a title so ancient and so universal that it hints at his place as one of the first. If Odin was the clever one and Thor the mighty one, Tyr was the just one, the god who represented fair combat, true speech, and the sacred bond of trust. But trust, as the gods would soon learn, is not always enough. For deep in Jotunheim, the land of the giants, a strange and terrible union had taken place. Loki, the trickster god, the ever-shifting wanderer who walked the fine line between ally and enemy, had taken a giantess as his lover. Her name was Angerboda, the bringer of grief, and from their union came 3 children who would shake the fate of the 9 realms. The first was the serpent, Jormungandr, who would grow so vast he could encircle the entire world, his tail in his mouth. The second was Hel, half living, half dead, who would rule over the underworld that bore her name. And the third was Fenrir the wolf. At first, Fenrir was no larger than any other wolf pup. But the gods had heard the prophecies, that these children of Loki were destined to bring about the end of the world. They acted quickly, casting Jormungandr into the sea and sending Hel to rule over the land of the dead. But Fenrir they did not kill nor banish. Perhaps they feared what might happen if they struck him down. Perhaps they believed they could control him. Or perhaps, in some strange way, they felt pity for the pup. Whatever their reasons, the Aesir decided to raise Fenrir themselves, here in Asgard, under their watchful eyes. And so it was that the wolf grew up among the gods. At first, it was almost amusing, a small creature with sharp little teeth snapping playfully at the hems of their cloaks. But Fenrir grew quickly, unnaturally so, his size doubling and redoubling until within a few short years, he stood taller than a man, his shoulders like the top of a horse's back. His jaws were powerful enough to bite through bone as if it were kindling. His eyes glowed with a fierce intelligence, and there was something in them, something that made even the bravest warriors of Asgard hesitate before meeting his gaze. One by one the gods stopped approaching him. None dared feed him, none dared touch him. None, that is, except Tyr. Every day Tyr would bring Fenrir meat. He would approach with calm, measured steps, his voice steady as he spoke to the wolf, tossing the haunch of some great animal onto the ground before him. Slowly, over time, Fenrir learned to trust Tyr. Of all the Aesir, Tyr alone dared to place his hand upon the wolf's head, dared to meet those burning eyes without fear. Some say this was the beginning of a bond, perhaps even a strange kind of friendship. But even friendship cannot change fate. The years passed and Fenrir became a creature of nightmare. His shoulders bulged with muscle, his fur bristled like a forest of spears, and when he howled, the very air seemed to tremble. The Aesir began to whisper among themselves. If the prophecies were true, if this wolf was truly destined to kill Odin at Ragnarok, then surely they could not allow him to remain free. But how could they act? They could not kill him outright. That would break the bonds of hospitality, the laws Tyr himself upheld. They could not banish him either, for he would surely return, and stronger than before. So they devised a plan. First they forged a chain called lading, a massive thing of iron, thick as a giant's arm. They brought it before Fenrir and said, "Let us test your strength. Surely you are mighty enough to break this chain. Let us see how strong you have become." And Fenrir, full of pride, agreed. They wound the chain around him, binding his legs, his shoulders, his neck. The wolf tensed, growled, and with a mighty heave, he snapped the chain apart. The links flew in every direction, ringing across the stones like hail. The gods were impressed, and troubled. So they forged a second chain, called Dromi, twice as strong as the first. Again they brought it before Fenrir, coaxing him to test himself once more. And again the wolf allowed them to bind him, and again he broke free, the chain shattering like dry twigs beneath the storm of his strength. Now the gods were truly afraid. If Fenrir could break even these chains, what hope did they have when the day of doom arrived? So Odin sent word to the dwarves, the greatest smiths in all the 9 realms, and asked them to make a fetter that no force could break. The dwarves worked in secret, deep in their forges beneath the mountains, crafting something unlike anything the gods had ever seen. When at last they returned, they brought not a chain of iron but a ribbon. It was called Gleipnir, and it was smooth, soft, light as silk. The gods were puzzled. This was no chain. This was no fetter. How could such a thing hold the wolf who had broken the strongest bonds ever forged? But Gleipnir was no ordinary ribbon. The dwarves told them what it was made of: the sound of a cat's footsteps, the beard of a woman, the roots of a mountain, the sinews of a bear, the breath of a fish, and the spittle of a bird. 6 things that could not exist. And yet the dwarves had taken them, shaped them, and bound them into a single unbreakable cord. The gods marveled. This was their last best chance. So once again they came to Fenrir. And now Fenrir's eyes narrowed. He had been tricked twice before, and this time the ribbon looked too delicate, too harmless. He could sense the deception. "I will not allow you to bind me with this," he growled, "unless one of you proves your good faith. Let one of you place their hand in my mouth while you tie me. If you mean me no harm, then no hand will be bitten. But if this is a trap..." No one spoke. Not Thor, whose hammer had felled giants. Not Odin, whose wisdom was said to rival the Norns themselves. None of the gods stepped forward save one. Tyr, the god of justice, the god of oaths, the god who had fed the wolf when none other dared. Without hesitation, he extended his right hand and placed it between Fenrir's jaws. The wolf's hot breath washed over his skin, the teeth pressed lightly against his flesh. There was no fear in Tyr's eyes, only grim resolve. And so they bound Fenrir with Gleipnir. At first, the wolf struggled only slightly, expecting the ribbon to snap as all the other chains had. But it held fast. He pulled harder, his claws tearing the earth beneath him, his body straining, muscles bulging, but still the ribbon did not break. And then he understood. He had been deceived. His eyes burned with fury, his lips drew back in a terrible snarl, and with one savage motion, he clamped down. Tyr's hand was gone. For a moment, Asgard was silent. The gods stood frozen, the weight of what had just happened settling over them like the first chill of winter. Tyr did not cry out. He did not fall to his knees. He simply pulled back his bleeding arm and held the stump aloft, as if to show all who watched that this was the price he had paid, the price they had all agreed was necessary. The blood darkened the grass beneath their feet, but Tyr's face remained calm, stern, almost solemn. The wolf thrashed and howled, shaking the earth, his roars echoing through the 9 realms. Fenrir's anger was not merely the anger of an animal. It was a storm of rage, a force of nature. His jaws snapped at the empty air, his teeth gnashing, his body twisting and straining against Gleipnir. But no matter how he fought, the ribbon held. The impossible fetter bit into his fur and skin until his struggles only tired him further. The gods stepped back, keeping their distance. Thor tightened his grip on Mjolnir. Odin's single eye glimmered with grim satisfaction. And something else, something that might have been sorrow. For though the All-Father was willing to do whatever was necessary to stave off Ragnarok, he understood what had been set into motion. The wolf would not forget. And Tyr simply stood there, his arms still bleeding, watching the wolf he had once fed, once trusted, once touched with the hand he no longer had. From that day onward, Fenrir was chained to a great stone on an island called Lyngvi, in the middle of a cold lake called Amsvartnir, the lake of pitch black. The gods drove a sword into his jaws, propping them open so that he could not close them, and from his mouth flowed rivers of saliva, which pooled into a foamy stream around him. There he remained, bound and furious, a prisoner of destiny. But the story did not end with Fenrir's imprisonment. If anything, it was only the beginning of a darker chapter for the Aesir. Tyr returned to Asgard with his arm bound, his wound treated, but he was not quite the same. In some tellings he no longer joined the gods in their feasts. He became more reserved, more thoughtful. Where Thor might boast of his battles and Loki might tell his clever, biting jokes, Tyr would sit in silence, staring into the flames, his mind far away. The gods, however, saw his sacrifice as a victory. They had bound the wolf, delayed the prophecy, bought themselves time before the end of all things. Yet this victory was bittersweet, for they knew that Gleipnir would not hold forever. The dwarves had crafted it to be unbreakable, but fate is stronger even than the finest dwarven craft. And Fenrir waited. The wolf's fury did not fade. He grew larger still, his strength swelling like a tide. When he struggled, the earth trembled. When he howled, the sky darkened. The sound of it chilled the hearts of mortals and gods alike. Some of the Aesir began to dread the day when Gleipnir would finally snap, for they knew what would follow: blood, fire, and the twilight of the gods. But even as the wolf waited, so too did Tyr. He became something more than he had been. If before he was the god of law and justice, now he was the god of grim necessity. The one who knew what must be done even when the cost was terrible. When oaths were sworn, his name was invoked, for no one knew better than Tyr the weight of a promise kept. When warriors prayed before battle, they called on Tyr not just for victory, but for courage. Courage to face pain, courage to face death. Centuries passed, but the bond between Tyr and Fenrir was never truly broken. There is a haunting symmetry in their story, the god of oaths and the wolf of destiny, each waiting for the day they would face the end together. And that day came at Ragnarok. When the world-shaking battle began, when the sun was swallowed and the stars fell from the sky, when the great serpent Jormungandr rose from the sea and Thor charged to meet him, the fetters of Gleipnir finally snapped. Fenrir broke free. His howl was like nothing that had ever been heard before. A howl that split the heavens, that made Yggdrasil shudder, that sent giants and gods alike into a frenzy. He ran across the earth, his jaws wide, swallowing everything in his path. His upper jaw scraped the sky, his lower jaw plowed the ground, and nothing could stop him. It was then that Odin met his doom. The All-Father rode to meet the wolf on his steed, Sleipnir, with spear in hand, but destiny cannot be denied. Fenrir leapt, seized Odin in his jaws and devoured him whole. But Tyr's fate lay elsewhere. In the chaos of Ragnarok, another beast awaited him, Garm, the Hound of Hell. Some say Garm and Fenrir are one and the same, others that Garm is his own creature, a monstrous watchdog who guards the gates of the underworld. Whatever the truth, Tyr faced him without hesitation. The two clashed in single combat, a fight so fierce that the ground itself split beneath them. Garm's claws raked Tyr's body, tearing through flesh and armor. Tyr struck back again and again, his sword flashing like lightning. At last they dealt each other mortal wounds. The hound fell slain, but so too did Tyr. And yet, in that death there was victory. Tyr had met his end as he had lived, not running from fate but facing it head-on, holding the line even as the world burned around him. In the new world that rises after Ragnarok, when the earth is green again and the few surviving gods walk among mortals, Tyr is remembered not as the loudest or most powerful of the Aesir, but as one of the bravest. His missing hand becomes a symbol of sacrifice, the cost of justice, the price of keeping one's word. Even now, when we speak of courage, of law, of honor, Tyr's shadow lingers. He is the reminder that true justice is not easy, that it sometimes demands more than we are willing to give. But it is also the reminder that standing firm, even at great personal cost, can hold back the darkness, if only for a little while. And perhaps that is why his story endures. For in the end, Tyr is not just a god. He is a mirror showing us the kind of bravery we might aspire to, the courage to do what is right even when the price is dear. So the next time you think of the Aesir, of their feasts and their battles and their endless schemes, remember Tyr, the one-handed god who fed the wolf, who kept the oath, and who faced the end without fear. If you enjoyed this story and want to keep exploring the world of Norse myth with me, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments, would you have dared to put your hand in Fenrir's mouth?